most people assume there is a big issue with gender pay. You don't think there is?
No, I don't. I mean, I think the first point to make about these BBC stars is that their salaries are like telephone numbers. They're so far out of the league of normal people's salaries.
Doesn't mean they shouldn't be paid equally, though,
well,
does it?
absolutely not, no. But I think what drives their pay is very different to normal people's salaries. So, for example, if you were working in a restaurant or a supermarket and you said to your boss, I'd like to negotiate my salary, you'd be shown the door. So in places like the BBC and for the celebrities who are working at the BBC, what drives their pay is very, very different.
Well, hang on a moment. I would just like to say that I think Carrie Gracie would absolutely defend a woman at any level doing any sort of job. However they are paid, that they should have equal pay with a man doing the same job.
But the point is, how do you compare? How do you say that these people are doing equal jobs? If you're working in a supermarket or in a shop or as a secretary, you're clearly doing the same work as somebody who's being paid as the same level, doing the same job as you.
And if you're a BBC
do we measure
editor, if you're an international editor, so whether you're the editor of Middle East or whether you're the editor of North America, both of whom are men and were paid more, her argument was that if you are a BBC China editor or, you know, another international editor, but you're a woman, the fact you're a woman should not mean you're paid less.
But the fact is that the American editor and the Middle Eastern editor are just on air an awful lot more. I mean, I'm...
in the context of BBC World...
as to why that is.
Actually,
Well, but that's an interesting point, isn't it, Sophie? Because there are lots of strands to this debate.
Yeah.
You know, Carrie Gracie, you've got to take my hat off to her. She's been very bold and courageous in doing what she's doing. And she makes a very valid point about equality on pay for commensurate jobs.
Yes.
What it doesn't allow for, and it's a really interesting question, this, I think, in football, you've got 11 guys on a team,
Yes.
right? They're all doing basically the same thing. They're kicking a ball around. Some will be earning 100 times as much as some of the others. And nobody minds about that. It's not a gender issue, it's a star performer issue. On this issue here, I know Jeremy Bowen, for example, quite well. This is a guy who's been shot at in war zones. He's very famous. He's very respected, very renowned for what he does. I didn't even know really who Carrie Gracie was until last week. Not to denigrate her work, but just Jeremy Bowen is a very famous war correspondent. Is there not an element of that reality, of his star power, his ability to draw perhaps potentially a bigger audience that should be factored in?
I think there's a whole load of... You're right, there's a lot to unpick here. First of all, the BBC's done a very good job of muddying the waters here by making this about a pay gap rather than about a pay discrimination. Partly because it split its numbers, so it did a separate audit of all of its top earners, which meant that when it did its pay gap review, it could then do it just based on staff and say, oh, look, we've only got a pay gap of 9%. Pay discrimination is illegal, right? It is illegal. And that is why the BBC keeps trying to talk about the pay gap instead, because that's not illegal. However, Carrie Gracie is a very senior journalist. She has worked for 20 years. She speaks Chinese. She covers arguably one of the most difficult areas to cover because it is so opaque and because it is dangerous in many, many ways. You don't just have to be facing gunfire to be in a dangerous situation.
And she has experienced detention, in fact.
But my point is that, first of all, the law should apply to everybody. This argument that these salaries are all so huge and we should just be grateful for what we've got is an absurdity. Because if we don't apply the law to the people at the top of the scale, we don't apply the law to the people at the bottom of the scale. And frankly, there are many women who have been watching Carrie Gracie thinking, thank you, I can't walk out of my job. I can't complain about my pay discrimination. I don't have the leverage that she does, but she is enabling us to have this conversation.
So she can set a marker for exactly those women, Dr. Williams, that you were talking about.
But the fact is that there are a lot of people who I know who are looking at Carrie Gracie having turned down a £45,000 pay rise and thinking, wow, that is more than I would ever hope to get paid.
And Carrie Gracie was not asking for a pay rise. She wasn't asking for equal pay. And the other point that I'd like to make is at the end, where Joanna's argument takes you to say that this is just about individual choice, you would have to then presume that the majority of women, of black, Asian, minority, ethnic people, particularly women, disabled people, working class people, are somehow all choosing to work in lower paid jobs to be less promoted.
This is about individual choice.
Sophie, let me ask you this.
I haven't said that this is about individual choice.
On, say, the X Factor or Britain's Got Talent panel, you've got Simon Cowell, and then you've got the others, right? is it fair and proper and right that Simon Cowell should get paid exactly the same as the other judges? Or is it right and proper, as I would argue, that he brings probably 2/3 of that audience?
Yeah.
They're his shows, he created them, he's the genius driving it, and he's the reason most people watch. So should he not be entitled, even though apparently, rather like with Carrie Gracie and the others, he's doing exactly the same thing?
I don't. Okay, so this is.
In other words, it's coming back to my thing again, which is
about talent.
In commercial television, we don't have these debates really because you're driven entirely by results, right? But on BBC television, they have it seems to me, a particular issue of they're publicly funded and people want to treat them rather like they treat politicians. In other words, everyone should get the same in a kind of step ladder.
You're making huge assumptions about talent.
Can you do that?
You're making huge assumptions about talent. One of the reasons the Women's Equality Party has got policies around equality in the media is that women are portrayed differently in the media. They don't get the same opportunities in the media. They don't get the presenting opportunities. They don't get the promotions. And what's
Is
really,
that still true in television?
It is absolutely true. When you look at the screen time, when you look at the BBC's list, for example, of top talent, showed that the top 7 people. Best paid people were men, and that black women were being paid less than white women, almost 4 times less than white men. So there is a clear problem. Not only do we have a pay discrimination problem and a pay gap problem, but because we have to spend so much time having very fundamental arguments about whether it even exists, we rarely get to the real issue here, which is that black women, disabled women, working class women are being paid even less again, and that is clear discrimination.
The problem is, whilst we're spending all of this time talking about the very high salaries of celebrities who we can count,
I'm talking about the black women and the working class women.
The discussion we're having here is focused on a very small number of celebrities. We're not actually talking about.
Imagine if that changed the world for everybody else.
You see, there's no evidence
because
to suggest that that's the case.
Carrie Gracie has power, being a high-profile woman
but there's
on
no
BBC,
evidence
which
to suggest
other women
that
don't
if Carrie
have.
Gracie gets an extra £50,000 a year,
she's not asking for that. She's asking for equal.
Sorry, you've had your say. If I could please say,
but you're misrepresenting what she's asking for. She wants equality, not more pay.
This is disingenuous because you don't get equal pay without either someone's salary coming down or your salary going up. Actually, I'd have a great deal more respect for these women if they did come out and be completely ballsy and just say, I want more money. I deserve more money.
Well, she
I think
definitely
that
says
would
that she deserves equality.
That would be doing all women a favour. But the fact is, women who are working in restaurants, as secretaries, as cleaners, their pay does not go up because Carrie Gracie gets extra money.